So Dr. Cindy Ann Landrum is a futurist, scholar, and equity-focused National Library leader with experience spanning federal, state, and local institutions. Dr. Landrum is the Alan Smith Visiting Scholar, Associate Professor of Practice at the Simmons School of Library and Information Science. She previously served as Acting Director and Deputy Director of the Office of Library Services at the Institute of Museum and Library Services, IMLS, the primary source of federal investment in the nation's museums and libraries. During her tenure, she invested in transformative efforts to increase equity, access, and innovation in museum and library services nationwide. Dr. Landrum has served in public libraries across the country, including serving as the CEO of the Evansville Vanderburgh Public Library in Indiana, and as Public Library Administrator in public libraries in Arizona, Pennsylvania, and Illinois. She is active in professional associations, advisory boards, and nonprofits. She earned a Bachelor of Arts degree in linguistics from Northwestern University in Illinois, an MLIS from University of Southern Mississippi, and a PhD in managerial leadership in the information professions from Simmons University in Boston. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Landrum.
Good morning, good morning. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay, all right. We're going to have a little technological shuffling here between this microphone, the slides, and my notes, because after Claire did her icebreaker and asked about your first email address, I realized that I was not of the generation that should be reading notes off of her telephone. I have a daughter, and she is, as you can imagine, much younger than I am. She looks like me, but we are not the same. And so she can do that, but I don't think that I will fare very well. So I just want to thank you all for having me today. I'm excited to be with you. I do want to extend appreciation and gratitude to my colleagues at the NC Live, the team, for each of you for allowing me to be a part of your conference today. I will say for me, I get jazzed about conference because, the learning and the sharing and just the intellectual exchange are, so invigorating. But I think the really important thing for me is community. And so I am just happy to be in community with all of you this morning, and I'm looking forward to our day together. It's also good to be here in the Hunt Library. As a longtime librarian, I have been sort of like an admirer, you would say, of this library. We'll call me a fangirl a bit. I will say when the library first opened, to all of its great fanfare, pictures of this library ended up in many of my presentations. And I think it's appropriate in the space to pay homage to Dean Susan Nutter, who was in many ways a futurist. She's also a fellow Simmons alum, so got to do that too. But she was dynamic, and she was visionary, and she engaged in a great deal of strategic foresight, even if she maybe didn't call it that. And she was really an inspiration to many of us. And so, I consider my good fortune to have met her as a doc student and to engage with her. And so I do want to just put her in this space as one of our library information science ancestors. And I think when we look at this building and all that it is, it's a very transformative space that we're occupying today. And I think she really understood the theme that I am bringing forward, which is this idea of thinking in an imperfect future tense. So I want to offer a disclaimer. I'm going to read it because I don't want people to be confused. Before we sort of jump into this concept, I want to know how many people have backgrounds in English majors in the house. Woohoo! Okay, all right. Linguistics majors in the house, anybody who considers themselves to be a writer, anyone who has any background in Romance languages, or if you just happen to be a self-certified member of the grammar police. I, Cynthia Landrum, am aware that there is no such tense as an imperfect future tense in American English. And we know that we associate the imperfect with past tense, not the future. But for our purposes today, we're going to take some grammatical liberties and imagine that there is such a tense. And we may find that even though this does not exist, maybe it should. So one of the reasons that I think we should be thinking about this, maybe this tense that doesn't exist needs to exist, because I think we find ourselves in this space right now, and we found ourselves in this space as we're sort of winding towards this 2026 marker, this semiquincentennial, which when I was at IMLS, it would be a contest to see how many of us could say fast 5 times or more, and then of course how many of us could actually spell it, totally different circumstance. But as we sort of moved our way towards this date, all of us, you know, we're ready and are readying ourselves for this commemoration, these celebrations, and yes, in some cases, litigation of this historic milestone, with its complexity and its nuance, and sometimes its very challenging narratives. And those narratives are not just challenging for us, they're also challenging globally in many ways. And for us as library colleagues, they are a context for the next milestone for us, because just 100 years after the founding of our country, 103 librarians met in Philadelphia and determined that they needed to plant the seeds for what will become our National Professional Association. The American Library Association was founded on this idea that there needed to be a body to promote the interests of libraries in our country, to increase reciprocity of intelligence and goodwill, and that is a quote, among librarians and all interested in library economy and bibliographic studies. And from those 103 librarians, ALA, as we know it, has grown into a complex, multifaceted organization with its fair share of triumphs and trials. And then, 220 years following the founding of ALA, and founding of the nation, and 120 years following the founding of the association, and after nearly 60 years of libraries being funding mechanisms in the Department of Education, and museums having federal funding mechanisms through the National Foundation on the Arts and Humanities, Congress recognized the great potential of museums and libraries to drive community economic development and support growth. And they commissioned and authorized what we now know as the Institute of Museum and Library Services as an independent federal agency, as my bio says, that is dedicated to being the primary source of federal investment in our nation's museums, libraries, and the communities that we all serve. And another milestone, I'll just put this out here because since we're on the milestone trip, my personal milestone today is my 1-year anniversary of being hooded for my dissertation. So yeah. I just want to say apparently there's some social media controversy about people really having advanced degrees, and I will just say I do have proof. My transcript is available, and I have a copy of my degree on my phone for those who want it. In many ways, presenting that chronology of sort of converging milestones really amplifies, for me at least, and maybe for some of you too, a feeling of certainty. Certainty in the past and about the past, but what about the present? I think there is some cathartic value in sort of relitigating sort of our immediate past present, and surely there is strategic value in doing so. But I think for today's purposes, I want to start us off on a positive note. What I will say is that despite the value of doing so, I think it's best for us just to say that, you know, the present feels precarious at best. And we will not for the moment entertain the worst. But I would describe this present moment as an inflection of sorts. I think there are attempts for us to distill this moment into what the picture on this screen sort of illustrates, that there's this human versus technology, or human with technology, or human or technology sort of narrative. And while I think that's true, you know, we talk about AI and we can talk about the other 5 things that will come after it. I think we really can't shy away from all that means, but we also have to, and I think we are all learning, that this moment is far more complicated, it's more layered, and I would argue that it is more systemic than I think we even really have understood. And so I think of it more of an inflection, and not necessarily of an inflection point as a singular moment, but a multitude of points that are overlapping, overlaid, and sometimes colliding across all facets of our social, political, national, global sort of networks. And this creates a bit of tension. But I don't think it's the kind of tension that we are accustomed to. I don't think it's kind of like certainty and uncertainty are in this tug of war with this frayed rope. No, I do think the tension we're experiencing is just a wee bit more colorful and a wee bit more fluid than, say, simple binary. And I think for that reason, it makes it just a wee bit more difficult for us to get our arms, our heads around it, even though that is what many of us wish we could do. And I think the tension of this moment is that, and we see this, I think, in our conversations around, for example, AI, is that there is a desire to make disruption a destiny. It is not a destiny. I think there's an opportunity, though, in this moment when we see that systems are becoming a little bit more malleable. And this is sort of, I would say, a rare moment in that there is an opportunity, albeit maybe we perceive it as a small one, in which we can think about the things that are important to us, our values, and we can sort of address those values before either they sort of calcify, or we can address them so that they are transformative. And I would argue that our sort of current inflection point in many ways is a struggle. And it's a struggle over these critical questions. Who gets to imagine the future? Whose knowledge counts? What forms of memory and public infrastructure will survive a transition? And I think this is where we as libraries and library people do our most important work, not just today, but our most important work in the future. So I would like to invite you to what I call a call to possibility. It is a call not just for us to preserve what has been or to survive the moment, but I want this to be a call for us to imagine, for us to expand possibility, to think about invention and to ideation, but also to do these things with intention. Because library futures and our futures are possible, they are probable, and they are plausible. And they are not futures that we can predict. We cannot predict the future. But we, library folks, have the capacity to shape, influence, and create futures. And we can do that because we have the capacity for sense making, to create spaces for sense making. From our ethical orientation, to engage in a little bit of speculative design, to embrace our collective imagination, and to even do a little bit of catastrophizing. I will put a little asterisk on the catastrophizing part because we do not want to catastrophize to anxiety. But even that has value because we can see and prepare even what we perceive to be a worst case scenario. But in order to do that, in order to be open to a call to possibility, we also have to be open to the idea that we should be thinking differently. And this is where we're going to get to the imperfect future tense, so bear with me. So, of course, as I said earlier, we know that imperfect is associated with the past. But the imperfect aspect, of course, is actually associated with this idea that actions are ongoing and continuous. And we can think about the future tense in a few ways. Obviously, we can use it to express actions that will take place in the future, our intention to act, the idea of forecasting the future. Originally this said predict, and I said no predicting, but we can forecast future events. And we can think about describing actions that will take place. We can think about how we proceed with intention, and we can think about the future in terms of particular conditions that may exist. And why is this important? Why is it important for us to think about the future as something that is ongoing? Because the future is not fixed. It is always unfolding. Our library futures, they're already happening. They're happening right now in this moment. And some of them we haven't even imagined yet. But it doesn't mean we can't. And guess what? When we get to the future is still going to be happening. Because the future is not a destination. It is a process, it is a movement, and it is an act of becoming. We never actually always get there, we're always moving forward. So today, I would like us to practice a little bit of becoming, a little bit of futuring. I want us to practice finding hope, because hope is not about certainty. Hope is about engaging in possibility. Let's practice aspiration and inspiration, because that's not about finding answers. It really lives in the questions that we are willing to ask. And finally, let us practice engaging our power. I know that right now it may not feel like we are powerful, but we are definitely powerful, and we can become more powerful when we are willing to imagine out loud. So this really is a call to think in an imperfect tense. It's an opportunity for us to rehearse the future. Let's claim the future before it arrives, and let's shape what comes next, because libraries have always been places where tomorrows are quietly built. One checkout at a time, one makerspace at a time, one book bike at a time, even one social work at a time, and of course, one good question at a time. So, one of the things I would like us to do is for us to do some futuring together. This is called the Futures Triangle, and it was developed by a gentleman named Suhail Inayatollah, who is the UNESCO Chair for the Future. And one of the things I love about what he says about the future, because a lot of times we think of this imagining as not having any value, but the value in the imagining is that we can use the future to create the present. And so I want you all to take some time. We're going to think about this. You can write it down. You can put it in your great brain. You can put it in your, take notes on your device. But I want you to really think about what is a future that we're moving towards as a library profession. What is the future we're moving towards? What are the trends that are shaping us today? So what are some things that we think are shaping us, AI being one of them, of course. But then, and I think sometimes this is the hardest question for us, is what are traditions or assumptions that might be holding us back from a future? So think about that. I would love if some people would be willing to share their thoughts about this. Thank you all for sharing and thinking, because it's very difficult. Just so you all know, thinking about the future is very challenging. We know we heard so many challenges, but that's just sort of that's like the immediate layer. But just neurologically, it is very challenging for us to engage futures. So thank you all for engaging your brain in a way that is technically not normal. We don't know our future selves. I mean, our brain, the part of our brain that's activated when we think of our future selves is the part that is activated when we meet a stranger. So our brain and the future are like strangers passing in the night. I will share with you that before, people always ask me about IMLS, and of course I'm happy to answer as many of your questions today about that, but I will share with you that the year before everything sort of happened, we had an administration change, I took the library office through a series of futures work, and we talked about what we were seeing in the environment. And of course, many of you know that for 4 straight years, IMLS was zeroed out the budget, and so that was sort of an indicator of things that were happening. And we did it in part because we were approaching this 30th anniversary of IMLS, which for those of you who know anything about the federal government, that's like, IMLS is like an infant agency, right? But it's a seminal birthday. And we talked about, what would happen, what are some scenarios that might play out for IMLS. And we talked about, what if there's no federal funding? But IMLS still exists. What might our role be in supporting libraries that are different now? And so, as you are taking this away and thinking maybe, in the middle of the night, you will wake up with an aha moment, I want you to think about the things that sort of surprise you in terms of how you're thinking about the future. I want you to think about, what feels possible. I heard two things that I think are really possible, like in the moment, that you can take baby steps. And NC Live is actually already doing that by bringing together a consortium of all different types of libraries, and really is a demonstration of what our ecosystem looks like in LIS. I also heard a lot about our librarians' capacity in areas of information policy. And before I left I am last one of the conversations I would have with various state librarians was, I think there's a potential for libraries in the policy-making side of AI. And I know that there's some executive orders and other things that in the moment kind of prevent that work, but I don't think that that's going to be forever, and I don't think that we should not do it just because there is some executive order that is floating around. So I want you to think about the future and think about the things that are happening around you that may create constraints, but also sometimes a constraint is actually an opportunity, because in the most extreme constraint is going to force us to think differently about how we do things and what we might have done that we couldn't have done in another environment. So I want you to think about, as we leave, you're in this space today with your colleagues and you've done a little thinking, think about the futures you want to create. Think about how you want to help your community create those futures. Libraries can be those places where not only do we reimagine ourselves, but in reimagining ourselves, we can help our communities imagine their own futures. And finally, I think this is really important. I'm going to go way back to my original statement, which is, the future is always happening. And guess what? This was a moment. This was a future. This was somebody's future. Stuart Brand, who runs the Long Now Foundation, this is a quote from him: "This present moment used to be an unimaginable future." And this is a piece by a woman named Amy Ager, who immortalized this in neon. And the beautiful thing about this piece is there's the unimaginable flickers on and off. And so for me, it's a reminder that this future moment right here was imaginable to somebody, and it was unimaginable to others. We can hold those two tensions together. And as the great poet Derek Walcott has often said, or had said, the future's going to happen no matter how much we scream about it. And I think that we have a choice. The future will either happen to us, or the future will happen through us. Thank you.